Here's this week's Steam Code raffle winner. I give a Steam Code for a free game away with every video I do, and all you have to do to enter is leave a comment that wouldn't violate Twitter's terms of service. Make sure you have contact info in your YouTube profile so I can reach out to you. A complete list of games to choose from is in the description below. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a chance to win. Now on with the show. I'm playing something almost every week, and sometimes I want to talk about it and give you a vertical slice. So stick with me for some lightning reviews. This week on the chopping block. This week I've been playing Atomic Heart, a game that this time last week I knew next to nothing about. I'd seen a screenshot or two showing that it was a first-person shooter, and that it was going to be set with some kind of Russian theme or environmental storytelling about it. This perked up my interest because, if you recall some of my previous videos, I'm a humongous fan of things like Metro 2033, I enjoyed my time with a game called Chernobylite, and I'm becoming genuinely interested in games coming out of Eastern Europe in general. In fact, I also have a video in the works discussing Metro 2033, and the overall environmental storytelling and its parallels with literary styles of Eastern European culture. If that sounds like a video you would be interested in, then let me know so I can figure out whether or not I'm wasting my time. Getting back on track, I started Atomic Heart with no impressions, but upon being offered limited control, the impressions started turning bad, and without trying to spoil, it was all downhill from there. Admittedly, reaching any positive perception was going to be something of an uphill battle because this was the first game I ever purchased for the full launch release price of the now somewhat ubiquitous $70 price point as opposed to $60. In fact, the main reason I had the funds to buy it was because I canceled my pre-order of Tales of Symphonia Remastered, but I digress. To establish an easy baseline comparison, Atomic Heart is trying to be like BioShock. However, if you recall the intro sequence to BioShock, it took maybe 5 to 10 minutes, right? Well, Atomic Heart took a half hour to engage in what could have been boiled down to a 5-minute world building and establishment sequence. This leads me to one of my first major problems with Atomic Heart. One can establish that some of the chief differences in types of media is how effective certain ways of storytelling take place. In movies, it is better to show rather than to tell, and in games, it is more effective to do rather than to show. Well, Atomic Heart has a chronic issue of telling you. Not only is it telling you, but it is often trying to shovel so much backstory, world building, and technobabble that it begins to become white noise. In my experience, every little thing needed to be explained rather than just letting the world play out and show me as I experienced it. Inversely, the game is incredibly bad at telling you stuff that would have been considered more vital to gameplay. The menus and UI are incredibly poorly designed, and my first couple of hours were soured when I was trudging around fighting murderous robots with a melee weapon, only to discover that I'd had guns available to me long after I would have started using them. Speaking of combat, the mechanics handle well enough, but when you're not trying to battle humanoid robots, you're usually fighting small and sometimes fast-moving little drone-like enemies, except because of some of the aesthetic design, some of the enemies weren't initially registered as enemies in my mind, but merely as Soviet Art Deco architecture, so usually the first notice I received that there were enemies in the area was when the main character started screaming pain noises. Additionally, depending on the environment, these enemies were set to regenerate or respawn infinitely, ensuring that my frustration never had an endpoint. So between irritating enemies and seemingly insulting attitudes that the writers had towards the player, I very quickly decided that I only wanted to be frustrated by one thing and turn the difficulty down to easy, so I'd only be getting angered by the writing. Although one element of writing that I've failed to mention so far is the main character and his assistant AI that lives in his glove. To phrase it charitably, they desperately need to shut the up. In this game's continuous need to fill every orifice with some excess of dialogue someone absolutely determined must be included, the protagonist and assistant are constantly having character-building exchanges. The character impression I get is a jaded and sarcastic asshole, and the AI glove is often being used to set up some kind of quip that made me hate any time they started opening their godforsaken mouths. In order to try and get through the game, I started putting on videos or podcasts to just listen to while the game would play out as I made my way from objective marker to objective marker. The problem with this is that every once in a while there would be some vital piece of world building that would actually be affecting the game moving forward, but the irritation experienced when actually paying attention caused me to not want to pay attention and I'd miss these plot points. Not that the plot is anything exceptional in and of itself. I can't say I've experienced the ending, but I can say that everything I've experienced thus far, I was fairly consistently able to predict. Although, frankly, getting to the end was beginning to become a torturous experience in and of itself. Let's bring up the comparison to BioShock again. We can all agree that most of that game's objective was to go to a place and gather a key item in order to unlock the next area, where you need to then gather another item to unlock the next access point. Well, Atomic Heart seems to take perverse pleasure in jerking you around by constantly throwing you another item to gather in order to move the plot along. In fact, I would gather one item only for it to then tell me I needed to get another item because the first one I got wasn't valid for reasons, and then, once I finally gathered the correct item once and for all, the game would make a joke at my expense by saying, oh, it turns out you didn't actually need it all along because your character is a law enforcement individual acting in an emergency capacity. You. Atomic Heart has a pathological issue that can be summed up as a lack of editing. In fact, given all the issues I've relayed, then I can say that the most engaging thing that I had throughout the game was whenever dialogue came up, I would ask a couple questions in flowchart format. First, was the exchange necessary for plot to keep the game moving? Second, if not, why was it included? Or alternatively, if it was, how much would I have been able to shorten it and reduce the amount of irritation experienced by the player? In fact, the only facet I can really give any praise to the game is in visuals. It looks good, but to make a nice metaphor, a cake can look as fantastic as you want, but if the second you bite in it tastes like dog shit, you're not going to want to have any more of that cake. For me, Atomic Heart is a borderline torturous experience, and I cannot recommend it. Bloated text leaks from every pore, and it makes the moment-to-moment gameplay insufferable because tuning it out leads to missing things necessary to move the game along. Nice-looking visuals can't save the experience from clunky UI and poorly communicated mechanics on what can be at best described as competent gameplay, and the verbal diarrhea has done nothing to aid that. Frankly, if I wanted to experience something like this again, I would just play BioShock and invite over the local communist conspiracy theorist to spew non-stop drivel in my ear. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to find something lighthearted and colorful for a nice palate cleanse. Hey, look at that, it's the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and remember that commenting can actually win you a free prize. So until next time, this is Gheeotine saying thanks for watching and keep your head on your shoulders.